Let me love them. The curvy woman spoke. The cowboy went quiet. The sun was dipping low over the wide Texas horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and orange. On a small, weathered ranch, a cowboy moved quietly among his cattle, the leather of his boots creaking softly with each step. His name was Jacob, though most people in the nearby town called him Silent Jake. He earned that nickname because he rarely spoke more than necessary. Years of hard work on the ranch and a past filled with disappointment had taught him that words were often wasted, but actions spoke louder. His hands, rough and scarred, were used to tending animals, mending fences, and keeping life in order. Words, however, were not his strong suit. Jacob's life was simple, predictable, and lonely. He had his ranch, his cattle, and the rhythm of his daily chores. He liked it that way. There was peace in the routine, comfort in solitude. He had once dreamed of love, but life had taken him on a different path. Loss and heartbreak had carved deep lines into his heart, and though his eyes were sharp and alert, they also held a quiet sadness, a silent story that he carried alone. That afternoon, as he guided a stubborn calf toward the barn, he noticed a figure approaching from the dirt road. At first, he thought it was a traveler seeking water or directions, which wasn't unusual in this part of Texas. But as the figure drew closer, he could see a woman walking with purpose, her steps steady but slightly weary. She was accompanied by two children, a boy and a girl, who clutched her hands tightly as if the world was both exciting and frightening at the same time. Jacob stopped mid-step and shaded his eyes with one hand. The woman was striking. She had curves that spoke of confidence, but her face carried traces of struggle. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark, a light that seemed to say she had endured much, yet refused to be broken. Her hair, dark and slightly tousled from the wind, framed her face perfectly. She wore simple clothes, practical and a little worn, but she carried herself with dignity. "Excuse me, sir," she called softly as she approached. Her voice was steady but gentle, not demanding, just honest. I was hoping you could help me. My children and I need some water and maybe a little food. We've been traveling for a few days and we're running out of everything." Jacob's first instinct was to be cautious. He had seen strangers before. Some were honest, others were not. But there was something in her voice that made him pause, something sincere, something that reminded him of a world he had long stopped expecting. He didn't say anything at first, just studied her. The boy tugged at her sleeve, looking up at her with big brown eyes, his small face streaked with dust. The girl, slightly older, held onto her mother's other hand, glancing nervously at Jacob. There was vulnerability there, yes, but also courage. Jacob finally spoke, his voice low and rough from disuse. "Water's not a problem. Food I can manage a little. You can follow me to the barn. It's clean, has a pump, and the kids can sit while they drink." The woman nodded, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she said. I really appreciate it." As they walked toward the barn, Jacob noticed the children's curiosity. The boy's eyes were wide as he looked at the animals, fascinated by the cows and the horses nearby. The girl, more cautious, stayed close to her mother but couldn't hide a small smile when she spotted a friendly calf. The woman kept a gentle hand on her children's shoulders, guiding them, encouraging them, comforting them in the way only a mother could. Inside the barn, Jacob showed them the water pump and a small pile of fresh vegetables and bread he had stored for emergencies. The children drank eagerly, their tiny hands cupping the cool water. Jacob watched quietly from a distance, leaning against a post, arms crossed. He was not used to this. People, especially women, rarely stayed long in his life. And yet something about the way she moved, how she cared for her children, made him feel different. After the children had enough water, the woman turned to him. "I don't want to be a burden," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "I know this is your ranch and you have your life. I just want a safe place for them for a little while." Jacob shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't sure what to say. He wasn't used to this kind of conversation. People came and went in his life, but they rarely asked for anything, and fewer still were genuine. He studied her face, the way she carried herself, and he realized she wasn't asking for charity. She was asking for trust, and that was something he guarded fiercely. The woman stepped a little closer, her gaze unwavering. "Let me love them," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Let me take care of them. You don't have to do anything, just let me try." Jacob froze. Those words hung in the air like a delicate promise. His eyes widened slightly, his usual calm and collected demeanor shaken. He had been alone for so long that words about love and care felt foreign, almost impossible. And yet hearing her say them, so gentle, so sincere, stirred something deep inside him, something he had buried long ago. The children, sensing the tension, looked at him with expectant eyes. The boy reached out and touched Jacob's arm, as if sensing that he was the protector of this place. The girl tugged at her mother's skirt, whispering something he couldn't hear, but it was enough to break the moment of silence that had grown heavy around them. Jacob finally spoke, his voice softer than before. You can stay for now," but he paused, unsure how to finish. He rarely had to explain himself, and now words felt awkward. "You'll need to help around here. This place, it's not easy." The woman smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face. "Of course," she said, "we'll do whatever it takes. I want a chance." And so a fragile understanding was formed. The woman and her children would stay on the ranch, not as guests, but as temporary part of a life that had been carefully structured and solitary for many years. The first night, they ate a simple meal together in the small kitchen attached to the barn. Jacob served quietly, observing them, while the woman made sure the children had enough to eat. Laughter, small and tentative, filled the space, a sound that was foreign yet comforting to him. As the evening shadows grew long, the children were tucked into a corner of the barn that had been converted into a makeshift bedroom. The woman sat near the fire, tending it gently, while Jacob remained on the other side of the room, silently watching. There was a tension in the air, a quiet energy that spoke of potential of change. Finally, she spoke again, breaking the silence. "You don't have to do anything for me," she said softly. "Just let me love them, that's all I ask." Jacob's eyes met hers, and for the first time in a long while he didn't look away. There was something in those words that touched him, a reminder that life could offer more than solitude and hard work. That perhaps even someone like him, who had built walls around his heart, could allow trust and care to enter. He didn't answer immediately. He just nodded slightly, the quietest acknowledgement that he had heard her and that he would allow her presence, her care, into this little corner of his world. The moment was simple, yet profound. It marked the beginning of something neither of them could fully understand yet, a journey that would change them all. Outside, the stars began to dot the sky, and the wind rustled softly through the tall grass of the ranch. The night was calm, but inside the barn, a small spark of connection had been ignited. Jacob, the quiet cowboy, had not spoken much, but his silence no longer felt like a wall. It was a space waiting to be filled. And the curvy woman, with courage in her heart and love to give, had just stepped inside. As the fire crackled and the children slept soundly, Jacob thought about the future, a future he hadn't allowed himself to imagine in years. He felt a mix of fear and hope, uncertainty and longing. But most of all, he felt the stirrings of something he thought he had lost forever: trust, connection, and the quiet promise of love. And for the first time in a long time, he did not go to sleep with the weight of solitude pressing down. Instead, he sat quietly, letting the warmth of the fire and the possibility of a new life fill the empty spaces of his heart. The night stretched on, calm and quiet, yet full of unspoken potential. Tomorrow would bring challenges, conversations, and the test of whether these fragile beginnings could grow into something lasting. But for now, the barn was alive with the simple, gentle truth of hope. And Jacob, the cowboy who had kept his heart closed for so long, went quiet, not from fear, but from the strange, new comfort of knowing he was not alone. The morning sun rose slowly over the ranch, spilling golden light across the fields. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and hay, and the quiet hum of life stirred in small, ordinary ways. The lowing of cows, the creak of the barn doors, the soft padding of horse hooves on dirt. Jacob was already awake, moving with his usual rhythm. He fed the cattle, checked fences, and inspected the barn, each motion precise and practiced. His mind, however, was elsewhere. The events of the previous day had left a strange feeling in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. He glanced toward the corner of the barn where the woman and her children slept. They were still quiet, the soft rise and fall of the children's breaths audible in the early morning calm. She had stayed up late, tending the fire and making sure they were all comfortable. Jacob's gaze lingered on her for a moment, noticing the lines of care etched on her face, the gentle strength in the way she carried herself. He looked away quickly, embarrassed by the thought that he might be noticing her more than he should. The woman stirred, brushing a lock of hair from her face. The children woke soon after, stretching and yawning, their small voices filling the barn with life. Jacob didn't intervene. He let them move around freely, preparing a simple breakfast of eggs, bread, and fresh milk. The woman worked alongside him silently, her movements calm and efficient. She didn't ask for help with the chores, she simply joined in, her presence steadying the space. As they ate, the children chatted quietly, telling stories of their previous travels, the small adventures and challenges they had faced. Jacob listened from the corner, occasionally offering a nod or a soft comment. He was cautious with his words, but he couldn't help noticing the way the woman encouraged them, praised them, and laughed at their jokes. She had a way of turning even the smallest moments into something joyful, something memorable. After breakfast, she took the children outside to explore the ranch, allowing them to interact with the animals. Jacob watched from a distance, his usual reserve softening as he saw how naturally they fit into this world. The boy ran toward the horses, trying to mimic the cowboy's stance and gestures. The girl followed the chickens around the yard, giggling as they scuttled under her feet. The woman stayed close, guiding them gently, ensuring they were safe but never hovering. Jacob's heart stirred in ways he had long forgotten. He felt a protective instinct he couldn't explain, a desire to see them happy and secure. And when he saw the woman laughing with them, her voice bright and warm, he felt something deeper, a pull toward trust, toward connection, something he had spent years avoiding. Throughout the day, the woman proved herself capable and determined. She worked alongside Jacob, helping with chores, feeding animals, and repairing fences. The children stayed close, learning quickly from her guidance. Her energy was steady, not frantic or overbearing, and Jacob found himself appreciating her presence more than he had expected. He admired her resilience and her willingness to do what was necessary, not just for survival, but for love. As the sun climbed higher, a small tension began to form. Jacob was unused to sharing his space with others, and while he appreciated the woman's efforts, he struggled with how to express it. He didn't know how to let her know that her presence mattered to him. His silence, which had always been comfortable, now felt like a barrier that might push them away. Yet he didn't speak, only watched, his feelings tangled in uncertainty. The woman noticed his quiet observation. She didn't confront him directly, but she spoke softly to him while fixing the fence. "I know you're used to being alone," she said, "and I know trust doesn't come easily, but I'm not here to take over your life. I just want to be part of it in a way that matters." Jacob's hands paused mid-motion, his eyes narrowing slightly. He didn't respond immediately, unsure what to say. He had long since stopped expecting understanding from others, and yet her words resonated. They weren't demanding, they weren't pleading. They were honest, calm, and steady. She wasn't asking him to change, only to allow her presence to open a small door and let them in. The day passed with small, tender moments that began to weave a quiet bond between them. The woman taught the children how to gather eggs from the coop without startling the hens. Jacob found himself smiling quietly as he watched her patience and guidance. Later, she helped him mend a broken fence, her hands steady as she held the posts in place. He didn't speak much, but he noticed the subtle ways she handled challenges, the determination and grace she carried with her. By evening, the ranch was calm again. The children were tired from the day's adventures, falling asleep quickly under the woman's watchful care. Jacob prepared a small dinner, and she joined him at the table, offering to help. He initially declined, but she insisted, placing a warm smile on her face that made him hesitate. There was something in her persistence, something gentle yet firm, that made him reconsider. They ate together, not as strangers, not as formal companions, but as people who were beginning to understand each other. She asked him questions about the ranch, about his work, about life here, and he found himself answering, though cautiously. He spoke about the animals, the seasons, the quiet rhythms of the land. And in return, she shared stories of her past, the challenges she had faced, and her hopes for the future. There was no judgment in her voice, only acceptance, and that slowly began to break down the walls Jacob had built around his heart. After dinner, they stepped outside to watch the sunset. The sky was ablaze with color, a breathtaking mix of orange, pink, and purple. The children played quietly nearby, chasing fireflies and laughing, their joy pure and unburdened. The woman stood beside Jacob, her hand brushing lightly against his arm. She didn't push for attention, didn't demand words, but her presence spoke volumes. Jacob looked at her, then at the children, and felt a strange mix of emotions, protectiveness, admiration, and an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. He realized that her words from the first day, "Let me love them," were not just about the children. They were about trust, about opening one's heart, about allowing connection to exist even in unexpected places. The evening stretched on in a quiet, peaceful rhythm. The children fell asleep under the stars, and the woman sat beside Jacob, her voice soft as she spoke about small hopes and dreams. She talked about the future in gentle tones, not demanding, not insisting, but sharing a vision of love and care. Jacob listened, silent but attentive, absorbing her words, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he was not alone. Night settled over the ranch, bringing with it a calm that felt almost sacred. Jacob remained outside for a while, leaning against the fence, watching the stars twinkle above. The woman's words echoed in his mind, soft and steady. He realized that he was beginning to trust her, to allow her presence in a space he had long kept private. And with that trust came a subtle shift in his heart, a quiet opening that promised new beginnings. The next morning, the routine continued, but the atmosphere was different. The children laughed more freely, the woman moved with an ease that suggested comfort, and Jacob found himself responding to their presence, not just observing. They were becoming part of his world, and he was slowly becoming part of theirs. There were small challenges, of course. The children tested boundaries, the chores were demanding, and the ranch required constant attention. But together, they navigated these obstacles, learning to work as a team, learning to rely on each other. The woman's courage and resilience inspired Jacob, showing him that love and care were not weaknesses, but strengths that could enrich life rather than diminish it. By the end of the week, a rhythm had formed. Breakfasts were shared, chores completed together, evenings spent talking quietly or watching the sunset. The woman had earned the cowboys' respect and trust, not through force or persuasion, but through patience, kindness, and unwavering care for her children. Jacob's silence, once a barrier, had become a bridge, a space where trust could grow slowly, steadily, and naturally. As the sun set once again, casting long shadows across the ranch, the woman placed a hand gently on Jacob's arm. "Thank you for letting us stay," she said quietly. "Thank you for trusting me, trusting us." Jacob looked at her, his usual stoicism softening. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he simply nodded, a small but significant acknowledgement. Words were still difficult for him, but his actions were starting to speak louder. And in that quiet, shared understanding, the beginnings of a family, fragile, imperfect, but real, were taking shape. The night came calm and serene, with the sound of crickets filling the air. Jacob sat quietly outside, reflecting on the week that had passed. He realized that his life had begun to change in small, meaningful ways. The presence of the woman and her children had brought warmth, laughter, and hope to a place that had long been solitary. He wasn't ready to speak of love yet, but he was beginning to understand it in its quiet, unassuming forms, in care, in trust, in the willingness to allow someone into his world. And as the stars shone above, Jacob felt a quiet certainty. Life was beginning anew. He wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time in years, he felt the gentle stirrings of something he thought he had lost: connection, hope, and the possibility of love. The morning on the ranch started with the usual calm routine, but beneath the familiar rhythm, tension had begun to stir. Jacob had been observing the woman and her children closely, noticing the way their presence had slowly grown into his life. He had started to care, more than he would admit to anyone, and certainly more than he would admit to himself. Yet with this new closeness came uncertainty, a fragile worry that the balance they had built might not last. The children were full of energy, as usual, running around the yard and laughing in the crisp morning air. The boy climbed on the fence posts, daring himself to jump, while the girl chased after the chickens, giggling as they fluttered away. The woman moved among them gracefully, guiding them, cautioning them, yet allowing them freedom to explore. Jacob watched quietly from a distance, leaning against the barn post, his arms crossed. He noticed the small gestures, the way the boy looked back at him, seeking approval, the way the girl glanced at him with curious eyes, and a pang of protectiveness rose within him. But the calm of the morning was soon interrupted. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving quickly toward the ranch. As the figure drew closer, Jacob recognized the rider as one of the neighboring ranchers, a man who often had disputes with him over water rights and grazing land. The neighbor, a burly man with a rough temper, had been known to cause trouble when he felt challenged. Jacob's jaw tightened as he dismounted from the fence and approached. "Jacob," the man called out, his voice loud and sharp. "We need to talk, now." Jacob's response was calm, though his eyes narrowed. "What is it this time?" he asked, his tone measured. The neighbor's eyes flicked toward the woman and the children, who were now standing near the barn, watching with uncertain expressions. "Don't worry about them," Jacob said quickly, stepping forward to shield them. "It's between you and me," the neighbor sneered. "I've been watching your little setup here. You've got visitors, huh? New blood on your land, that's fine, but don't let it get out of hand." "Rules are rules." Jacob's lips pressed into a thin line. "We follow the rules here, always have, always will. You're welcome to check for yourself." The man grunted and rode off without another word, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Jacob exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. He felt a mix of anger and concern. The neighbor's warning wasn't just about land. It was a subtle threat, a reminder that the world outside his quiet life could intrude at any moment. The woman approached him, her eyes curious and concerned. "Is everything okay?" she asked softly. Jacob hesitated, then nodded. "It's fine, just someone with a temper, nothing we can't handle." She studied him for a moment, sensing that there was more to his words, but she didn't push. Instead, she placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We're here to help, remember? Whatever comes, we face it together." Her words struck him deeply. For years, he had faced challenges alone, relying solely on himself. The thought of sharing his burdens, of allowing someone else to stand beside him in the difficult moments, was unfamiliar, and yet comforting. The day continued with small chores, but the tension lingered in the back of Jacob's mind. He noticed the woman's gentle ways in handling the children, the animals, and the ranch work. Her calm demeanor acted like a balm, easing the unease he felt from the earlier encounter. Yet beneath that calm, a storm of fear and doubt churned. He wondered if he could protect them all, if he could handle the responsibilities of caring not just for the land, but for people whose safety depended on him. Late in the afternoon, a sudden accident put that fear to the test. The boy had climbed a tall haystack, daring himself to jump down. Jacob's heart stopped as he saw the precarious position, and he rushed forward, shouting, "Careful!" But the boy slipped, falling toward the ground. Jacob's reflexes kicked in instantly. He grabbed him just in time, pulling him back to safety. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, and he clung to Jacob, shaking slightly. "I'm okay," he whispered, though Jacob could see the panic in his face. The woman ran over, her hands trembling as she checked the boy for injuries. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice urgent yet controlled. When she saw that he was fine, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Jacob stood there, the adrenaline slowly leaving his body. He looked at her, the concern in her eyes mirrored in his own chest. For a moment, words failed him entirely. He wanted to tell her that she was strong, that she had done everything right, that he appreciated her. But his voice remained silent, trapped behind walls built long ago. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "It's okay," she said softly. "We're okay, don't be too hard on yourself." Jacob nodded, his silence heavy with unspoken emotions. He realized then that he couldn't always keep control, couldn't always stay alone, and that sometimes accepting help and care was not weakness, but strength. The evening brought a quiet that contrasted sharply with the day's tension. The children were fed and tucked into bed, the ranch was calm, and the sky was a deep navy, sprinkled with stars. The woman sat near the fire, tending it as she often did, and Jacob remained on the other side of the barn, silently observing. She spoke first, her voice breaking the quiet in the most gentle way. "You know, Jacob," she said softly, "life can be hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely. You don't have to face everything alone." He looked at her, his jaw tight, unsure how to respond. Her words struck a chord he hadn't realized existed. He had spent so many years relying only on himself, believing that asking for help or allowing connection was dangerous. But now, seeing her, seeing the children, he understood that there was more to life than survival. There was trust and care and love. The woman smiled slightly, sensing his inner struggle. "You don't have to say anything," she added. "Just know that we're here and we care." "And that's enough for now?" Jacob's eyes softened as he watched her. He wanted to speak, to tell her everything he felt, but the words didn't come. Instead, he nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of understanding. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. The night passed with a quiet tension that was not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken emotions. Jacob stayed awake longer than usual, thinking about the day's events, about the boy's fall, about the neighbor's warning, and about the woman's gentle courage. He realized that life on the ranch was changing in ways he hadn't anticipated. The woman and her children were not just temporary visitors. They were becoming part of his world, part of his life, part of his heart. The following morning brought more challenges. A sudden storm rolled in from the west, dark clouds gathering quickly over the ranch. The wind picked up, rattling the barn doors and whipping the tall grass into waves. Jacob immediately began securing the animals, making sure they were safe from the incoming storm. The woman helped him, moving with calm efficiency, guiding the children to safety and ensuring that everything was prepared. As the rain began to fall, heavy and relentless, Jacob worked alongside her, their movements synchronized without a word. He realized then that he had begun to trust her completely. She was capable, reliable, and steady in the face of challenges, and her presence made the ranch feel less like a place of work and more like a home. After the storm passed, the family emerged from the barn to inspect the ranch. Some damage had occurred, a broken fence, scattered hay, but nothing that couldn't be repaired. The woman smiled, her eyes shining despite the exhaustion. "We can fix this," she said, "together." Jacob nodded, feeling the weight of the words more deeply than usual. "Together," he repeated softly, almost as if testing the sound of it. As the days passed, small tensions arose, not from conflict between them, but from the natural challenges of blending lives. The children tested boundaries, the chores required teamwork, and Jacob had to confront the limits of his patience and adaptability. Yet through every challenge, the woman remained steadfast, encouraging, and patient. She didn't demand change, only asked to be allowed to contribute, to love, and to care. One evening, after another long day of work, the woman spoke quietly to Jacob. "You don't have to be afraid," she said softly. "Love isn't about perfection. It's about care, trust, and being there for each other. You've done that for them and for me in your own way." Jacob's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her that he was scared, that he didn't know how to handle this, that he had been alone for too long. But he didn't. Instead, he simply nodded, letting the silence speak for him. And in that silence, something profound passed between them. A quiet understanding, a bond forged through trust, care, and shared experience. By the end of the week, the ranch had weathered its storms, both literal and emotional. Jacob realized that life was no longer just about routine and solitude. The woman and her children had brought laughter, warmth, and love into a space that had long been quiet. And though challenges remained, he knew that together they could face them. As night fell, Jacob stood outside, looking up at the stars. The woman joined him, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll be okay," she said softly. "All of us." Jacob didn't respond immediately. Instead, he felt the truth of her words settling into his heart. They would face life's challenges together, not just surviving, but thriving in the quiet strength of connection and trust. And in that moment, Jacob understood something he hadn't in years. Love wasn't about words alone. It was about presence, action, and the courage to let someone in. The woman had offered him that courage, and he was finally beginning to accept it. Morning came gently over the ranch, the sky painted in soft shades of pink and gold. The air was calm, carrying the smell of wet earth and fresh grass from the recent storm. Jacob moved quietly among the animals, checking fences and making sure everything was in order. Unlike other mornings, however, there was a lighter feeling in the air, a subtle warmth that seemed to follow him. The woman and her children were already awake, helping with small chores, their laughter drifting across the barnyard like a melody. Jacob paused for a moment, leaning on the fence. He watched the children feed the chickens, their small hands careful and precise. The boy laughed as a chicken flapped its wings unexpectedly, and the girl clapped with delight. The woman, standing nearby, guided them gently, her eyes soft yet alert, always watching, always caring. Jacob realized that this scene, so ordinary, had grown to be something extraordinary in his heart. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of completeness, a feeling that his life had expanded in ways he never imagined. The woman noticed Jacob watching and smiled. She walked toward him, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "You've grown quiet this morning," she said softly. "Thinking about something?" Jacob hesitated, the words caught in his throat. For so long he had kept his feelings locked away, afraid to let anyone in. But now he felt a stirring of courage, a desire to express what had been building inside him for weeks. He wanted to tell her how much he appreciated her, how much her presence and the children's laughter had changed his life. Yet he knew words alone were not enough. Instead, he nodded slowly, letting his silence speak the truth of his feelings. The woman's smile widened, sensing his acknowledgement. She placed a hand on his arm. "We're here," she said gently, "all of us, and we're staying." Jacob felt a weight lift from his chest. He didn't need to respond with words. The simple truth of her statement filled him with a quiet relief and a burgeoning hope. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a life where he was not alone, where love and trust could coexist with his solitude and hard work. The morning passed with the usual chores, but now there was a rhythm of cooperation and understanding. Jacob and the woman worked side by side, their movements synchronized without speaking. She handed him tools, guided the children in feeding the animals, and shared small smiles that spoke volumes. The children laughed freely, their joy unburdened and contagious. Jacob felt a warmth in his heart he hadn't known in years, a quiet happiness that came not from material success, but from connection and care. By afternoon, they gathered the scattered hay from the storm, repaired the fences, and ensured the animals were safe. The work was hard, but the shared effort brought a sense of unity that Jacob had not anticipated. He realized that the woman had not only earned his trust, but had woven herself and her children into the fabric of his life, creating a bond stronger than any fence or gate he had ever built. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Jacob led the children to the pasture, showing them how to ride the horses safely. The boy's laughter rang out as he learned to balance, and the girl's cautious confidence grew with each step. The woman watched from nearby, her hands clasped in front of her, pride shining in her eyes. Jacob noticed the way she looked at the children, the soft care in her gaze, and he felt a deep admiration for her strength, patience, and love. Later, they returned to the barn, the children exhausted but happy. Jacob and the woman worked together to prepare a simple dinner. She moved around the kitchen with ease, placing food on the table while he watched, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. There was a comfort in this shared routine, a sense of belonging that he had long denied himself. After dinner, they sat outside on a wooden bench, watching the sky turn shades of orange and purple. The children had fallen asleep nearby, their soft breathing a reminder of the fragile yet powerful bond they shared. The woman leaned slightly toward Jacob, her voice soft and sincere. "You've done so much for them, Jacob, for me too, and I want you to know I see you. I see the man you are, the courage you carry, the care you offer, even if you don't say it out loud." Jacob felt a lump in his throat. For years, he had lived in silence, masking his emotions behind stoicism and solitude. But her words reached into the quiet corners of his heart, unraveling the fear and doubt that had held him captive. He wanted to speak, to confess everything he felt, but words were still elusive. Instead, he reached out, taking her hand gently in his. The simple touch conveyed what words could not, a promise, a connection, a willingness to open his heart. The woman smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "That's enough," she whispered. "Just being here with us is enough." Night fell and the ranch was bathed in the soft glow of the moon. The children slept soundly, their presence a comforting reminder of the family they were becoming. Jacob and the woman sat together in quiet companionship, the stars above reflecting the vast possibilities that lay before them. For the first time, Jacob allowed himself to dream, not of solitude, but of life shared, of love nurtured, of challenges faced together. Over the next few days, life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and new. The woman and her children became part of the daily routine, their laughter and energy infusing the space with warmth and vitality. Jacob found himself participating more, guiding, teaching, and caring in ways he had not expected. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, a connection built on trust, respect, and the shared experiences of life on the ranch. One evening after the children were asleep, the woman spoke again, her voice tender. "Jacob, I want you to know love isn't about perfection. It's about being there for each other, through the storms, the hard days, and the quiet moments like this. You've shown me that without even trying." Jacob looked at her, his eyes reflecting the depth of his feelings. He finally found his voice quiet but firm. I'm learning," he said. learning that it's okay to care, to trust, to let someone in. She smiled, her hand finding his again. "That's all I ever wanted," she said softly. As the weeks turned into months, the ranch became a true home, filled with laughter, love, and shared responsibilities. Jacob and the woman faced challenges together, unexpected storms, minor injuries, and the daily demands of ranch life. But they did so as a team, each supporting the other. The children thrived, their lives enriched by stability, care, and the gentle guidance of both Jacob and the woman. Jacob found himself opening in ways he had never imagined. He shared stories of his past, of mistakes, losses, and lessons learned. The woman listened without judgment, offering understanding and encouragement. He realized that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to deeper connection. And in return, she shared her own past, her struggles and triumphs, creating a mutual trust that strengthened the bond between them all. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of color, Jacob and the woman stood together, watching the children play nearby. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and the gentle rustling of leaves. Jacob felt a profound sense of gratitude for the woman, for the children, for the life they had built together. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly, and she responded with warmth and understanding. "I never thought life could feel like this," he admitted quietly. "Neither did I," she replied, smiling. "But here we are together." Jacob nodded, feeling a deep contentment he had not known in years. The journey had not been easy, and challenges would continue to arise, but they had found something enduring: trust, love, and a family bound not by circumstance alone, but by choice, care, and shared hearts. The night grew quiet, the stars twinkling above as if celebrating their newfound happiness. Jacob knew that the path ahead would require patience, courage, and continued effort, but he was ready. For the first time, he felt truly whole, not just as a cowboy, but as a father figure, a partner, and a man capable of love. The woman leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand in his, and whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me love them, and you." Jacob's heart swelled with emotion, and though he remained mostly quiet, the warmth in his eyes said everything words could not. He had gone from solitude to connection, from caution to trust, from fear to love. And in that moment, under the vast Texas sky, they all understood. Life was brighter, richer, and more meaningful together than it could ever be apart. The children slept peacefully, the fire burned low, and the ranch rested under the calm moonlight. Jacob finally allowed himself to close his eyes, feeling the weight of loneliness lift, replaced by the gentle certainty of love, family, and belonging. The journey had been long, the challenges many, but the reward was undeniable. A life full of trust, laughter, and quiet joy, shared with those he had learned to love, and who loved him in return. And so, as the stars glimmered above the quiet ranch, a new chapter of their lives began, full of promise, hope, and the quiet, enduring strength of love that had been earned, nurtured, and freely given.